It all started with the hum. Not a loud one, just a low, rhythmic vibration you felt more in your teeth than heard with your ears. We'd been working in the old Butte Cotton Mills complex in Lowell for about 3 weeks, a crew of 6 hired to do a preliminary structural survey before some big developer turned the place into overpriced lofts. The money was good, the work was straightforward, but the place had a weight to it. A silence that felt less like an absence of sound and more like something holding its breath. I was partnered with Vanessa that day. Vanessa. Just saying her name now sends a weird little shiver down my spine, a cocktail of old desire and fresh dread. She was a structural engineer, sharp as a tack, with this way of looking at a crumbling brick wall like it was a puzzle she was born to solve. And God, she was beautiful in a way that made it hard to concentrate sometimes. She had this cascade of dark, curly hair that she'd always tie up in a messy bun, but strands would always escape, framing a face with cheekbones so sharp you could probably cut yourself on them. She wore these fitted, gray Henleys and cargo pants that shouldn't have been sexy but, on her, absolutely were. They hugged her hips, showed off the curve of her waist, and I'd find myself watching the way the fabric stretched across her back when she reached for something, or the subtle shift of her breasts when she breathed. It was unprofessional. I know that I was dating someone, kind of, but out there in that dusty, echoing vastness, with just the 2 of us on the 3rd floor of Building 4, it was a fight to keep my eyes on the job and not on the way her lower lip glistened when she took a sip from her water bottle. "You hear that?" she asked, lowering her clipboard. She tilted her head, and a loose curl brushed against her neck. I had a sudden, stupidly vivid image of what it might feel like to push that curl aside with my thumb. "Hear what?" I said, my voice coming out a little rougher than I intended. I cleared my throat. "Just the wind, this place is like a giant flute." "No, not the wind," she said, frowning, her brow furrowed, and it was somehow even more attractive. "It's like a thrumming. A machine, but there's no power." I stopped and really listened. She was right. Beneath the occasional groan of the ancient timber and the whistle of wind through 1,000 broken window panes, there was a steady, mechanical pulse. Asterisk thump 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 star. A pause. Asterisk thump 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 star. "Weird," I admitted. "Maybe it's the plumbing in one of the other buildings? Vibration traveling through the brickwork." Vanessa didn't look convinced. "Sounds like a loom. My grandmother worked in a mill in Fall River when she was a girl. She used to describe the sound, said it got into your bones." "Well, let's hope it's just a friendly ghost loom and not an unfriendly ghost something else," I joked, but it fell flat. The sound was getting into my bones. It felt like a heartbeat, but all wrong. Too steady, too metallic. We went back to work, marking stress fractures on a schematic, but the sound was a new presence in the room with us. It was faint, but persistent, a constant rhythmic itch at the edge of perception. I'd glance at Vanessa, see her listening, her body still, and my eyes would drop to the line of her throat, the way her pulse fluttered there. The mix of it, her palpable unease and my own inappropriate attraction, was a confusing, heady feeling, fear and desire, all tangled up. That's when we saw him for the first time. Down at the far end of the floor, maybe 100 yards away, where the light from the grimy windows faded into deep shadow, a figure was standing. He was just a silhouette against the gloom, unnaturally still. He wasn't one of our crew. We all wore bright safety vests. This man was dressed in dark, shapeless clothes. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing through the cavernous space. "This is a closed site, you can't be in here." The figure didn't move. Didn't respond. Vanessa shifted closer to me, her arm brushing against mine. I could feel the warmth of her through my sleeve. "Who is that?" she whispered. "No idea. Probably some urbex kid." I tried to sound confident. "Hey, I'm talking to you." I took a step forward. Yes, I did. The man turned and simply melted into the shadows between 2 large dormant machinery units. There was no sound of footsteps, no rustle of clothing. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. We walked down to where he'd been standing, our footsteps loud in the sudden silence. The loom sound had stopped, the air was dead and cold. "There's nothing here," Vanessa said, her voice tight. She was right. The area was empty, just a thick layer of dust and pigeon droppings. There was no door he could have exited, no staircase nearby. It was a dead end. "Weird," I said again, feeling the word was utterly inadequate. We reported it to our foreman, a gruff old guy named Frank who'd seen everything. He just shrugged. Kids. Addicts, they get in all the time. We'll do a sweep at the end of the day. Don't let it spook you. He gave Vanessa a look that was a little too long, a little too appreciative of how her cargo pants fit, and I felt a stupid, possessive spike of irritation. The next day the sound was back, louder. Asterisk thump 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 thump, screech dot thump 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 thump. Asterisk, it was more complex now, not just a rhythm but a sequence, with a horrible metallic shriek at the end of each cycle. It was coming from the same end of the floor. Vanessa was visibly on edge. She kept jumping at small noises, her hand fluttering to her throat. Every time she did it, I'd notice the delicate shape of her wrist, the smooth skin there. My focus was shot that I was half-hard most of the time, a nervous, anxious energy that had nowhere to go, mixed with a growing cold unease. We decided to investigate the source of the sound. We armed ourselves with heavy flashlights and walked toward the back of the building, the beam of my light cutting shaky paths through the dust-filled air. The sound grew louder with every step, a physical pressure in the air. Asterisk thump 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 thump. Star. We reached the dead-end area. It was still empty, but the sound was deafening here, seeming to come from the very walls themselves. This is impossible, Vanessa shouted over the din. Her eyes were wide, frightened in the stark flashlight beam. Her face was all dramatic shadows and highlights, her lips parted. I had a bizarre, overwhelming urge to kiss her, right then, in the middle of all that terror, as if it would somehow make it stop. And then, as suddenly as it started, the sound cut out. The silence was absolute, and somehow worse. My ears were ringing. In the void left by the noise, we heard a different sound. A soft, shuffling scrape. We swung our flashlights toward the source. In the farthest, darkest corner, the man was sitting on an old, overturned barrel. He was just watching us. He was older than I'd thought, with a gaunt, pale face that looked like it had never seen the sun. His hair was thin and gray, plastered to his scalp, but it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins. They were too large, too dark, and utterly vacant. He wasn't blinking. He was holding something in his lap. A long, narrow strip of faded cloth. You hear it now, he said. His voice was dry and raspy, like pages turning in a forgotten book. It wasn't a question. Who are you? I demanded, stepping slightly in front of Vanessa. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What are you doing in here? He ignored me. His dark eyes were fixed on Vanessa. A slow, terrible smile stretched his thin lips. It didn't reach his eyes. It's for you, he said, holding up the strip of cloth. It was a patterned weave, complex and strange. The pattern is almost complete. Vanessa gripped my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. What is that? What are you talking about? The loom knows, he whispered. It always knows. It weaves the truth of what's to come, see? He unspooled a bit of the cloth. The pattern was mostly a mess of brown and gray threads, but at the very end, a clear image was emerging. It was crude, childlike, but unmistakable. It was the silhouette of a woman, her hair in a bun, falling, and wrapped around her neck was a thick, black thread pulling taut. Vanessa made a small, choked sound. She recognized her own silhouette. I lost it. Get the hell out of here! I roared, taking a threatening step forward. Get out now or I'll call the cops. The man's smile didn't falter. He slowly, deliberately folded the cloth and tucked it inside his coat. He never broke eye contact with Vanessa. Soon, he said. Then he stood up. He didn't rise like a normal person. He just seemed to unfold, his movements all wrong, too fluid and jointless. He turned and walked into the solid brick wall. I'm not saying he disappeared into the shadows. I'm saying he walked into the wall, and was gone. There was no secret door, no crack point. 1 second he was there, the next he was part of the masonry. We ran. We didn't stop running until we were out of the building, gasping for air in the weak afternoon sun. We tried to tell Frank. He took one look at our pale, panicked faces and sighed. All right, that's it, you two are done for the day. Go home. Get some rest. You're seeing things. He thought we were spooking each other, maybe that we'd been fooling around in the dark and spooked ourselves. The look he gave me was a knowing, lecherous smirk. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I just grabbed my gear and left. I drove Vanessa home. She lived in a small apartment in the Acre, a neighborhood not far from the mills. She was silent the whole way, shaking, staring out the window. When I pulled up to her curb, she didn't get out immediately. He knew what I looked like, she said, her voice hollow. That drawing, it was me. It was a coincidence, I said, trying to sound convincing. A sick prank, some local nut job. I reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. Her muscles were tense under my palm that I could feel the strap of her bra through her shirt. The intimacy of the gesture, in the midst of all this, was electric and wrong that I wanted to pull her to me, to feel her body against mine, to prove we were both still solid and alive. My thumb moved, almost on its own, stroking the curve of her shoulder. She flinched away from my touch. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp. She looked at me and for a second I saw something else in her eyes besides fear. Disgust. Disgust at the situation, at the man, maybe at me for my clumsy, hormonal advance at a time like this. She got out of the car without another word and hurried inside. I sat there for a long time, feeling like a monster. My face was hot with shame. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but now it was mingled with a deep, humiliating guilt that I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's empty eyes, that I heard the loom. Asterisk thump 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 dasher. Asterisk, and I saw Vanessa's face, the fear in it, the way she'd recoiled from me. The next morning Frank called me. His voice was different. No more smirking, that he sounded old and tired. "Don't come to the site today," he said. "Why? What's wrong?" "It's Vanessa," he said, and my heart stopped. She had an accident last night." I couldn't breathe. "What kind of accident?" "The police are here. They're saying it was in her apartment. Something with the plumbing in the old building. A fault in the heating system. They found her this morning." He paused, and I could hear him struggling to find the words. "They said it was a freak thing. A flexible gas line behind her water heater. It somehow got looped around a pipe, and it tightened like a noose. They said it would have been quick." I dropped the phone. I didn't hear it hit the floor. All I could hear was that dry, raspy voice. Asterisk, the pattern is almost complete. Asterisk, and the image on the cloth, a falling woman, a thread pulling taut around her neck. I drove. I don't even remember getting in the car. I drove straight to the mill. I didn't care that it was closed. I smashed a window on the ground floor of building 4 and climbed through. I had to see. I had to know. The building was silent, deathly silent. No wind, no groans, no hum. My footsteps echoed like gunshots as I ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. I went straight to the dead-end corner, my flashlight beam dancing wildly. It was empty. Just dust and decay. But on the floor, right where the man had been sitting, was a small, neatly folded square of cloth. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely pick it up. I unfolded it. It was a new pattern. The weave was finished. It showed a man, a crude representation, but I knew it was me, standing in this very room, and from the ceiling above him, a heavy shuttle-like piece of iron machinery was falling, its path traced by a sleek black thread, heading directly for the man's head. I looked up. Above me, suspended by rusted chains and rotten wood, was the massive iron beater from a long-dead loom. Even as I looked, I heard a sound above the pounding of my own heart. A soft, metallic click. Then the groan of stressed metal. The chains were giving way. I didn't stay to see the pattern complete itself. I ran. I'm still running, I think. I quit the job. I left Lowell. I moved across the country. But sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I hear it, faint at first, then clearer. A sound that isn't a sound, a vibration in my molars. Asterisk thump 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 thump. Asterisk, it's looking for me. The loom is always weaving, and somewhere, a pale man with empty eyes is holding a new strip of cloth, waiting to show me the final, perfect pattern.